Studying the Word of God can be difficult. One of the easiest ways to study the Bible is one verse at a time, but at times it can seem overwhelming. Our goal in this podcast is to wrestle with the text and dive in deeper. We pray that this edifies you and empowers you to fall deeper in love with the Bible and Jesus. Welcome to Everyday Theology. Hello, friends. I mixed it up because you said I was going to say one thing. Welcome to another episode of Everyday Theology. My name is Guy Parkerson. I'm here with my good friend John Muth is back.
Hello.
Newbie, how are you?
Good. Am I the best friend?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
You're out.
None of you are.
Move on.
I love myself today.
Oh, he's throwing us. All right.
Ian Stamps, how are you?
I'm all right.
Good. Anything anybody want to talk about today?
Nope. See y'all.
So I was watching this episode of Power Rangers.
Yeah. Oh, no. Oh,
No, I'm just kidding.
No. Please, no. So, Acts 18. Let's jump in there because we've got a lot to talk about. There was so much in this. I found myself I found a lot of applicable stuff, like stuff that I could
Apply.
apply in my own life. I was trying not to use the same word twice.
Thesaurus. Apply. I'll say it.
The so what? You found a lot of the so what.
I did find a lot in the so what. But, it starts off with Paul. Once again, he is just, he's gone from Syria to Derbe to Lystra to Galatia. I mean, he's just on this mission. And he ends up in Corinth. Not such a good place.
No, Corinth is known historically for gross immorality that defined their culture for multiple reasons, mainly the temple to Aphrodite, or Venus, depending on whether you're calling her by her Greek or Roman name, that brought about a lot of sexual immorality. Their pride was notorious. Read 1 Corinthians and see what
That puts a lot of
what the
context
Christians
to what-
in Corinth were wrestling
Yep.
with.
Yeah.
Much less the pagan culture. Yes. Who thought it was a good idea to give John the buttons?
John.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So he again, this is one of the things we love about Paul. He's gone from this intellectual debate in Athens on Mars Hill to Corinth, now the immoral center of the empire. So now it's not about idolatry. Now it's about immorality, and he faithfully does what he does, no matter the context. He still goes and reasons with the Jews that Christ is their Messiah. He preaches the gospel in the marketplace to all the pagans, and he just does what he does, no matter where he's at. You have to admire that.
You do, but you also we're starting to see the frustration in it. He's come to a point where I think you said he's weary.
Yeah. Again, he tells the Corinthians, "I came to you in weakness, fear, and trembling." All of the things that he's done has taken its toll, and it should. That's understandable. That's right and good. Again, Paul is not Superman. We cannot project onto him this superhero status that he is immune to all of this. He just goes in unfazed by the comments and all of that, and preaches, and he leaves and goes and does it again. That we cannot take Paul's humanity away from him. That's not fair, and he's struggling. That's for sure. And it won't be the only time we see this, but the Lord is so faithful to him and shows up and gives him a vision. It's been a long time since the Lord has given him a vision, but he gets one here that really makes a difference for him and continues to fuel everything that he's going to do.
He's probably starting to question himself because he's having to work now instead of just preach. He's like, man, I got to go back to a part-time job. Maybe this isn't working out.
Yeah. This is a hard season.
Yeah.
The second missionary journey that he's on, that's getting ready to conclude. The text for this coming Sunday is the conclusion of the second missionary journey, and then chapter 19 immediately opens with the beginning of the third. It's been a hard road. This has been challenging. He travels thousands of miles and endures all of this. And if you've ever even just traveled internationally, it's exhausting. And we do it on airplanes. He's doing it on foot and on boats, not even modern boats. It's not like a cruise ship. And this is a hard way to live. Very hard.
So they didn't have shuffleboard.
He's not playing shuffleboard. He's not hitting golf balls off the back of the boat. The eco ones that melt in the water so it doesn't kill the dolphins. He's not doing that. He's not playing bingo on the Lido deck or anything like that.
They could have had bingo.
They might have had bingo.
Yeah.
If there was a city that had it was Corinth.
Well, you can totally understand. I mean, here's Paul. He knows that he's doing the Lord's work. He completely understands God's holiness. He's going from city to city, and he's not quite getting the results that he was getting at the beginning. I mean, he was converting thousands, and now he's barely getting a trickle of converts. Mm-hmm. And then he gets to Corinth, and now he's like, I'm working for the creator of heaven and earth, and I can't even go buy a sandwich. I got to go make some tents.
I got to make a tent.
This is getting this. I mean, I can totally get where he's coming from.
I'm sure it's frustrating, but there is no hint in the text that he's bitter about that he's upset about that. It's just one of the factors that has taken its toll, and we know that he wants to do this more full time because the second that Silas and Timothy show up with the financial support, he immediately puts down the tent and starts preaching full time. So he's just waiting for that opportunity, and he gets it because the church in Philippi was very generous to him. And rightly so. They should have been.
Why?
He was their spiritual father.
You think
he was the
preachers
church planter.
deserve to be paid for their work?
That sounded very accusatory.
Didn't it?
It did.
There was
I
a
mean, you can't-
condescending tone there.
You're going to have to defend this.
You can't see his eyes in the video, but he's like, why?
Yeah. There's animosity behind that.
I think so.
Yeah.
Why?
Yes, I will absolutely defend that, knowing that it's self-serving as a preacher who gets paid.
I know. Looks really bad. Go ahead.
Doesn't it?
I think you're going to quote Paul a few times here, aren't you?
Yeah.
Because Paul thought so too.
I'm going to quote Paul, and I'm going to use Paul as an example.
Whose side are you on, first of all?
Not yours.
Yeah, never.
So here in chapter 18, this is the narrative example of why pastors should get paid. We have, it happened. This is a good thing that the church in Philippi financially supports Paul, his missions efforts. This is why we support missionaries. This is why we support preachers, so that they can do this work full time. Because Paul couldn't. He's working a day job.
Yeah.
And now he's having to worry about that to make ends meet. And he's only going and preaching on the Sabbath because that's the only time he has. But the second that financial support shows up, he can stop that and preach full time. And that's a win for everybody involved, for the kingdom, for the people in Corinth. That's why I would argue it's primarily from Lydia, but from the whole church in the city of Philippi. This goes down, everybody wins. Paul will speak of this in 1 Timothy 5, verses 17 and 18, of what is referred to as the double-honored elder. That in any congregation, there are elders. That's how a church is governed. Those spiritually mature men who are to protect and preach to the flock, and they are the ones who are leading God's people there. Of that group, there are to be those who work in preaching and teaching. And the double honor is the pay. Again, read 1 Timothy 5, 17 and 18. That you've got this honor that's to all of the elders because they deserve that, because they're your leaders, spiritual authorities, and all of that. But then there's a second honor, which is why it's a double honor, that goes to those elders who work in preaching and teaching. So we have a command to pay at least one or a couple elders to work full-time, to devote themselves full-time to the preaching and teaching that happens in the life of that congregation. So we've got the narrative example of it in Acts 18. We've got the command for it in 1 Timothy 5. And the whole purpose of that is so that the church will benefit.
Yeah.
Because and I deeply admire what bivocational pastors and all, they work their full-time job and then.
But one of them's going to suffer.
then
You
preach.
can't do two jobs.
Absolutely.
Do both of them well.
What did we hear yesterday? It was like 80%.
88% around the world.
Are
pastors
bivocational. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that much?
Yeah. Globally, 88%. We have it really good in America. Really good. So that's not true in America alone or in the Western context, but globally, 88%. So what a benefit, a blessing it is for a congregation to pool some financial resources and identify one of those elders and go, all right, Sean, we want to benefit as a congregation from your full-time effort, studying God's word, praying for us on our behalf, shepherding us. We don't want you distracted doing this other thing and this in your spare time. We want your full-time attention to this so that we as a church will benefit more because of that. So that's the biblical model.
I just got a job offer.
No, that's not
Did you
true.
hear that?
I think so.
It's
it was
recorded.
hypothetical, Sean.
Denied.
Good timing. You got that one. Mm-hmm. Well, I also thought it was interesting that, Paul mentions that, but he doesn't mention it in Acts in this text. He mentions it. He's writing to the Thessalonians from Corinth, right? Yeah. And so he mentions it in First Thessalonians.
Sylvester the Cat's over here.
I'm not even going to try to say it again. You remember, brethren, and labor and travailed, for laboring night and day, because we wouldn't be chargeable to any of you. We preached unto you the gospel of God. He said, I didn't want to freeload off you, so I worked day and night. Mm-hmm. So, one, he's working, and then in Second Thessalonians,
Good job.
Yeah, there we go. 3:8. He said, Never did we eat any man's bread for nothing. Yeah. So he's obviously working, and then Timothy and Silas show up with some cash.
Yep, they do. They support him, and now he can, rightly so, devote all of his efforts solely to his missions endeavors, to the calling that the Lord has placed on him, and everybody benefits when he does this full-time. Everybody. Not necessarily him, because as soon as he starts full-time, that's when everything tanks in Corinth, and the resistance and the blasphemy comes against him. Because he is now devoting full-time, and they get tired of it, which is a great thing. Mm-hmm. That they know exactly what he's about and what he's saying, because it's constant now. It's daily now, not just every Sabbath.
So he's got some good news. He's got some money coming in, and he meets some good friends, Priscilla and Aquila.
Yes, and they will travel with him numerous times after this. They do leave Corinth with him, and then they camp in Ephesus for a while. And Paul doesn't stay; he leaves, and then he comes back to Ephesus, where he'll spend the largest portion of his entire ministry in the city of Ephesus. And Aquila and Priscilla have been there the whole time that he was gone. So they are the ones who are doing that initial cultivating work before Paul even gets there and anchors in. So they have become dear ministry partners of his, and they're all over the place. They're mentioned in Romans. You have multiple places.
6 different places I saw.
They come up. Yep.
So you think they were Christians?
They've been converted at some point.
Yeah.
And they're hosting churches in their homes. So that the church in Ephesus met in their home. That we know.
And yet they're still going to the synagogue.
Yeah. Well, because they're Jewish.
Yeah.
So there's not churches in the places that they live. So they are still culturally Jewish, and they are going to the synagogue because that's where the scriptures are, and that's where they're getting Old Testament passages. That's where they're evangelizing Jews. It's a win-win. And then once the New Testament churches begin in the cities that they're in, they then switch their loyalties over to the church. But they can't if there's no church. Yeah, so they're hanging out with synagogues. We're going to see Paul's Jewishness this coming week as well. He makes a Nazirite vow.
He quits cutting his hair?
That'll be fun.
Well, he cuts his hair because he's under a vow. So what is he doing as a Christian, making a Jewish vow? Yeah, so we're going to talk about that. Because
cliffhanger.
It is, yeah. More to come next week of why he does that. Yes, the Nazarite vow of why bother. So again, they're still. It's not that they're religiously Jewish anymore. Christ has redeemed them, and their trust is in Him. But they're culturally Jewish, so they're still now, as Christians do today, honoring their faith heritage by living out many of the things that are explicitly told us in the Old Testament.
Yeah, I have a respect for Jewish people, even though we don't practice Judaism, but we have the Old Testament in common. You know,
we do.
That is the end of theirs, but
yeah, and the sadness of not identifying their Messiah, this heartbreaking, which is why we still to this day evangelize the Jews. And in fact, there are videos going around. They're fascinating to see if people they're in the streets of Israel and they're interviewing people and they ask, have you ever read the New Testament? Do you know what the New Testament's about? And they're clueless. They have no idea.
Well, I'm sure it's
no. I mean, why would they know the New Testament? And they introduce them to Jesus, and this is your Messiah. Like you have a claim to him because you're Jewish, but now so many of them are culturally Jewish, not religiously so.
Yeah.
And again, they have no frame of reference to understand even what that means or why that's a big deal. That wasn't true here,
right?
In Acts,
it was very religious.
They're very religiously Jewish. Yeah, very much so.
I feel like that's becoming more and more true in every world religion. That there's cultural, and there's cultural Christians, cultural Jews, cultural Muslims.
Yep.
There's a guy I used to. We used to go to a food bank in Boston, do a pickup every Wednesday, and he was a cultural Muslim, and it was Ramadan, and he works at night. He's like, that's why I like working at night, because they can't eat during Ramadan. They can't eat from sunup to sundown. He's like, I can eat whatever I want. And when my mom calls me and asks me if I'm observing Ramadan, I can say, yep.
Yes, I am, because I work at night. Yeah.
They should read the J.C. Ryle quote that you said at the beginning.
Oh, the zealous man.
Oh man, that summed up the way we should live for Christ.
Yep.
There's no cultural Christianity in that quote.
No, none whatsoever. I mean, we deal with that obviously in America. It's one of the biggest challenges for the American church. When we were in Ghana a few weeks ago, Chris, the elder who was on our trip, asked our host, our mission partner, Jared, so as you interact with the Muslims, do they have that phenomenon here where they're just cultural Muslims? They're not necessarily very religious. He goes, oh yeah, it's like 90%. So, I mean, very few Muslims that you're interacting with are legit Muslims. It's just, they're Muslim because their parents are Muslim. Yeah. Their grandparents are Muslim.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, they're not religiously so. They're not committed to Allah and the Quran or anything like that. They have no idea.
But I bet that's not very true about Christianity there.
No.
Good point.
The Christians are legit.
Because there's a price to pay for being a Christian.
There's a huge
face
price
some
to
opposition.
pay.
Right.
Yeah. Why would you ever do that? Because you lose so much, and the risk is so great. So if you're a Christian there, it's quite true.
Well, it's like Paul going into the synagogue in verse 4, and he's persuading Jews and Greeks. Can you imagine doing that today? Walking into a mosque or a synagogue and being like, let me tell you.
Yeah, let's talk.
Let's talk for a minute. I mean, I just can't imagine. I mean, you're not going to walk out of that with some type of persecution.
Mm-hmm. I saw a video yesterday in Israel, a group of Jewish men, and they're Orthodox. They're wearing the hat. They've got the curls of their hair, coming down, and they walk past a group of 2 or 3 nuns, and they turn and they spit on the nuns as they walk by. They just walked by. They didn't even interact. It's not like they're arguing about faith or whatever. They just spit on them because of what they represent.
Christianity is the only religion that you can openly and freely persecute. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's backlash if you attack Islam, Judaism, anti-Semitic, but people can, you never hear any pushback from making fun.
Yeah.
Or
no, I would say it's even worse because the name of Christ it's used in everyday swear words.
Sure.
I mean, there's not a day that goes
Yeah.
by that I don't hear my Savior's name used in a profanity.
But isn't that odd? I mean, isn't
It's
that
very
odd?
odd.
That Christianity stands alone in that area.
Well, it's almost like the Bible says something about that.
Yeah, like persecution's real. And so if a journalist in the Middle East draws a cartoon of Muhammad, like, they can kill him for it. Can you imagine if that happened in the States and a TV show? Jesus is a recurring character in shows like Family Guy,
Yeah.
and all of that. Can you imagine
Evil pagan show.
Yeah, I know, it's terrible. Who would ever watch something like that? Non-Christians, that's who. And people have good senses of humor.
Yep.
And can you imagine if they just started killing, the people who you write the show and draw the show and all that because you did that. But that's what they do about Muhammad. It is illegal to disrespect him.
I thought of a nun pun, but I was too late. By the way, just wanted to point that
A
out.
nun pun.
Yeah, it was a nun pun. I was like, missed it.
Yeah,
Doesn't
you try.
Yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Doesn't happen.
No, it simply doesn't.
And it's my wife and I were talking too just about that phenomenon because we hear about things like that, but it's really hard to understand it unless you experience it. And we were just talking. We were on a walk, and I was talking about how at camp there were missionaries there, and they were telling some stories about about these people that they knew as adults, but had such faith and trusted in the Lord, but just grew up in such these harsh conditions. And they were talking about one day they were talking about the slums, and they were showing pictures and all this stuff, and it's like, man, you'd think that would make these kids, this room full of like 200 plus middle schoolers, more grateful for what they have, but for the most part, it doesn't.
Yeah,
because they're like, oh yeah, that's terrible, and it lasts for like a few hours, and then at dinner they're like, I don't like this chicken. I don't want to eat it. Like, you will eat it. You will like it.
you will thank God for this chicken.
There's a child in the slums that didn't even eat today. It's just you don't know unless you actually go there, and
Yeah, you see it with your own.
it's not as impactful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's the same with persecution. Like, we can hear about persecution and just these things in other parts of the world, but like the underground church in China, we talked about that yesterday. And like, it's good to be reminded of those things, but it's like I still have no context for that. I don't fully understand what that's like.
I cannot fathom the realities that some of these people have to deal with. So, my wife had a medical thing last week, so I sat. I have a Bible reading plan that I do that I'm on, and we had to leave in the morning to get there. And while she's back having the procedure done, I'm sitting out in the lobby of the hospital with my Bible in my lap, doing my reading, drinking coffee. And everybody's walking by. It's not like it's a hidden thing. I didn't think anything of it. There are some countries that if I do that and they catch me, they're going to kill me in the street. Like, that's legitimate. Like, I have no way to mentally comprehend that. I carry my Bible with me in my backpack. Well, if you're in certain countries and they catch you with said Bible, the first thing they do is burn it, and then they kill you for having it. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah. So these churches in places like China, these underground churches, have a copy of the Bible. If they're thoroughly blessed, sometimes it's only a couple of pages that they've all shared. They have a couple of pages, and the pastor has to hide it. And before they have church, whenever they have their secret church service, the pastor has to go and get it, from the woods that he's hidden it in, or under the floorboards of his house, or wherever, so that when they get together, they can have God's word.
Yeah,
I don't understand that, and it's heartbreaking that that's the case.
You get a very accurate number of Christians that way, though.
You really do.
You do.
Yeah. How many in here are Christian? All of them, because if they weren't, they wouldn't be in here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we cease to forget that, Paul's going into these synagogues and he doesn't have the Bible like we have today. I mean, he's challenging them with his experiences, I guess.
Well, and I mean,
And their scriptures. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, his experiences and relating them to the Old Testament scriptures,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, he's arguing that Jesus is the Christ, and the way that he's doing that is, I'm sure there's an element of I saw him. He knocked me off the horse, and and they blinded me for 3 days, and
But
and
that
all that
only goes so far.
There's that, but
Yeah.
but the primary part is, hey, let's talk about Isaiah 53.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Deuteronomy 18. Let's talk about Psalm 22. Like, who do you think that's talking about? This is him. Look, this has been fulfilled now. It's him.
And that was at a time that it was very easy to go back and see that he had been executed.
Yeah.
I mean, this is very recent. Now when we reason with people like that, we argue that there was this person named Jesus who was crucified, but I mean that would have been pretty easily provable back then.
Yep.
Well, Paul, we even say it, 1 Corinthians 15, here's all these people that Jesus appeared to after he rose from the dead. Most of them are still alive. So if you want to go talk to them, just go talk to them. They'll tell you what happened.
Yeah, and you remember when all those dead people came out of the tombs? Like, do you guys remember that?
I think that would have been enough to convert me, or at
mean,
least listen to him.
that's crazy.
Yeah. Hey, there goes. Hey, is that a corpse walking down the road? Like, I mean, that's crazy. Hey, do you remember when the temple, the curtain in the temple tore in two, and everybody freaked out because if you go into the Holy of Holies when you're not supposed to be there, God strikes you dead, and now this is like unleashing the killing presence of God, into the city of Jerusalem. Do you remember that? Yeah. Let me tell you what that meant.
Right after the sky was black and there was earthquakes.
Yeah. In the middle of the day, it just went dark for 3 hours. Remember that?
Well, and his debating tactics must have been because, I mean, right here in verse 8, we see Crispus, the ruler of the synagogue, believed in the Lord together with his entire household. So he's getting some traction going.
Yeah.
So he's obviously able to reason well.
With those who know the scriptures the best. I mean, the leader of the synagogue, this guy is the smartest guy in the room until Paul walks in. But I mean, this guy knows the scriptures the best. He's in charge of it all. And not one, but two synagogue leaders are converted out of the city.
I love that you talked about Sosthenes. I didn't even.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't even know that
I
or
wanna
put
get
that
to
together.
That's really good.
Yeah.
But what I noticed was after he gets this, this positive response from Crispus, then he gets a vision from the Lord. It says, "Do not be afraid, but go on speaking and do not be silent." To me, that kind of made me think that Paul at that point was at the peak of his frustration. So there must have been quite a bit of persecution coming from after he converted Crispus, the leader of the synagogue.
Yeah, that's not going to go well with the rest of the Jews.
That's not going to go well.
Yeah.
But then I love the 3-part instructions that God has for him. I'm with you. No one is going to attack you. And I have people in the city. You need to go out. You're not done. Oh, and I love do not be silent. So, I mean, you got to think that God knew that Paul was thinking about, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a little vacation.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that even though that was a vision from the Lord to Paul, do you think that we can take those words and apply them to us? Do not be afraid, but go on speaking. Do not be silent.
I think partly,
For I'm with you.
but not fully. I think the do not be afraid, sure. I think the I'm with you, sure. We know that as a fact that he's with us. But the promise of divine protection, no one will harm you.
Yeah.
We can't claim that one as our own.
That was specific about that city.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. I think that the Lord has people here in this city who are yet to be converted. Absolutely. I think you can take all those. I think you have to pull out the protection one that God has not promised that I'm going to be safe.
Yeah.
If I do this, he might, but that doesn't mean
that seems
at
like
any moment it could happen.
That seems like that would be a very popular verse to rip out of context and say as a
of course.
motivating factor to go on missions trips.
No, I think there's a point to be made of if God is truly sovereign over life and death, which he is, because the Bible is explicitly clear about said things, then I will not die a second before the Lord wants me to.
Yep.
So there is a sense which you could say, yeah, I am divinely protected. And the moment that I die, no matter how it is or when it is, that's when the Lord wanted that to happen.
Sure.
So, yeah, but I also don't want that to be misunderstood or miscommunicate that by accident with, well, go do whatever and it's going to work out just like you want it to.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily. Again, I have shaken hands with pastors who later in the year after I met them were murdered for their faith. Their wives were raped. Their houses were burned down. I've met those men, and I'm not going to pull that verse and go, oh yeah, you're good. Go ahead. The Lord's going to protect you. Well, maybe not. He might allow all manner of horrific thing to happen for the sake of the expansion of his kingdom.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be careful with those kinds of things. But I think most of it, we can absolutely claim that, of course, the Lord is with us. Therefore, I shouldn't be afraid, and I should keep on speaking. What are they going to do to me?
What's the passage that says that right now we see it's like we see partial, like is it in like a clouded mirror, or am I mixing two verses?
No, you've got, we're looking in the mirror, but then we'll see clearly face to face. And
is that talking about something about us, or is that talking about like what we, like just circumstances and the picture?
I think it's all of it, that no matter what we have now, we don't get the full picture. We're not seeing all that's happening. We don't even have the full picture of the Lord and who he is and what he's done. But there's a day coming where we're going to get the full picture.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
Like I'm so excited about that. Like someday we'll be like,
look at that. Well, I mean, all the little things that we have no idea God is up to. I mean, in theory we do, but the things that the Lord has saved me from, the split second things that could have taken me out but didn't, that I'm not even aware of, that this is what God's been doing behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see all of that.
I feel like what I've been learning lately is that's maybe that's maybe the most important thing. I don't know. It's been on my mind a lot, so that's why I say next month it'll be like another most important thing. Now this is the most important thing
ever
that we can remind each other about. And as pastors, like I was talking to a young man at camp he's 16. He wants to go. I found out he wants to go into ministry, and I was talking to him about this. I'm like, really, I think the best thing that you can do to love people is when you go into ministry is just to constantly remind people to focus on eternity.
Yeah.
Like that, remind people that your life is so short, and it's so short for a reason. Because I think
I got to remind myself of that.
I think God is, that's just God's goodness. Hey, this sinful brokenness, it's pretty short. It feels long.
Yeah.
I mean, 50 to 100 years. I don't know how long I'm going to live. I'm going to live till I'm 51.
51.
No, I might be 91.
Oh.
I don't know, but it's still short. Either way,
the good news is you're going to live forever.
It's a mist. It's there 1 second.
It's a vapor.
I'm going to live forever.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm going to live forever with Jesus. I thought you were making a joke or something.
No, you're going to live forever.
I'm going to be the first bionic man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, was it C.S. Lewis who said you've never locked eyes with someone who wasn't immortal? I mean, just the reality of the need for evangelism. Like this person is going to live forever somewhere, and I should care about that because they might live forever in hell.
But that's something
that should matter.
That's something that we can both remind believers of, but also remind unbelievers of as we share the gospel. That you're not promised another day. Yep. You don't know.
I was watching a video the other day of one of these young guys who's like a gajillionaire and talks about success and all that, and it just came up on the feed. And some of these guys I really admire and respect, appreciate what they do and the things that they are teaching and projecting and all that. And one of the things he said was, I bought a piece of property, and I own land. Like there's this like inner part of me, like this manhood of, yes, this is my property and all that. He goes, then it hit me. Who has owned this piece of land before me? There was the previous owner who this was mine, and then he died and it went to me, and there was the guy before him and the guy before him and the guy before him. He's like, at the end of the day, no matter what you have, it all just gets reshuffled around to somebody else. So whether that's $1 or $10 billion, it just gets reshuffled to somebody else. So don't really make too much of that. I was like, yes, thank you, Mr. Pagan billionaire, for if we're coming to a biblical conclusion about
Now
your
let's
wealth,
look at my private jet.
That's a hard place to hit when you're in your 20s. you know?
Yes. But how wise that is. Teach us to number our days aright that we may gain a heart of wisdom, the psalmist says. Well, yeah. So understanding the temporary nature of life is what gets you the heart of wisdom. It doesn't say the wise number their days.
Yeah.
It's those who number their days gain wisdom. So that's how you live wisely. It's all going to end. And that's okay, because I'm going to go be with the Lord, so I'm not going to be mad. I won't be disappointed at that. I'll be thrilled. So bring it on.
Do you think Paul knew, or do you think, so it says in verse 10, I have many in this city who are my people. Do you think Paul thought he was done with Crispus? And, like, okay, I didn't have much going on in Athens. I'm probably done here. So God had to reinforce.
I think so. I think you're right on target there, because if you track with the other cities that Paul has gone through, once he gets to this point, he's had a fairly major conversion here with Crispus and his family. He's got a core group that now he can start this new church and it can go. He can leave. There's persecution. He probably needs to get out of town anyway. So this is about the time he would normally leave and depart to go somewhere else. And the Lord stops him and says, you're not done. There are more people in this city who are yet to be converted. And he stays for 1.5 years. That's profound. He wouldn't have stayed 1.5 years. He hasn't done it yet.
Yeah, that's profound. But what I think is even more profound, God could have very easily said, go to Sean Newby's house at 103 East Main Street, go to John Muth's house, but instead...
That's not Sean's address.
I know.
Okay.
But instead what he does is he just says, go preach the gospel.
Yeah.
It seems like it just would have been so much easier and clearer to say, I need you in 5 days to go to this next town, but he wants Paul to stay there for 1.5 years, which is... He also writes 6 more books of the Bible while he's in Corinth. So he's obviously extremely busy. He's productive.
Yep. And he has no idea who those people are that are the Lord's people in this city. God knows. Paul does not. So it could be anybody. So he interacts with those people then as if you might be one of the Lord's people. So I'm going to share the gospel with you. I'm going to love you. I'm going to serve you because you might be one of his. You might not be. Okay. But because he doesn't know that, he doesn't treat people poorly. He doesn't ignore them. He doesn't. Think of the practical nature of this.
Yeah.
That God knows whose are his. We don't. Therefore, this is why we evangelize. This is why we preach the gospel. This is why we serve and love and help, because that neighbor, that coworker, that friend, that golfing buddy just might be one of the Lord's people.
And I'm sure that while Paul was there, he didn't see all those conversions. He could have, someone could have heard him preaching in the street, and that seed was planted, and that could have come to fruition much later after Paul left.
Yep. So the faith involved of that.
Yeah. You just don't know.
You do what I've told you to do. I'll take care of the results. You just do what I've told you to do. Yeah. What a way to live today. Just do what he said to do.
You said at the beginning of your sermon, God's sovereign nature is highlighted in Corinth. And to me right there it was.
Yep. Well, and even this great phrase, I have many people in this city, to see what the scholars have done with that phrase is really, really intriguing. Because it's a very Calvinistic phrase. It's a very, God has predestined, ordained all of this. He knows those are his, so you stay. Even scholars who don't necessarily hold those views about salvation all say this has to be what's happening in that phrase.
You can't really get around
it. It
that.
is. Even they say it's undeniable, because to try to explain that away any other way is just flat unfaithful to the
That's
text.
cool.
It's like, oh, well, good for you. Yes, well done.
A little honesty.
Yes, I appreciate that. Like, I don't even hold this view, but
From an Armenian.
But this text here we go. Yeah.
Did anybody else find it funny that Paul, when he shakes his cloth, the dust, and he's like, I'm done with you guys.
I'm out.
See ya. I'm going to go next door. The guy has got such a heart and love for the Jewish people.
Yep.
He just cannot.
He walks like 20 feet.
Yeah. He's like, I'm done with you guys. Blood be on your heads.
Yep.
I'll be at next door if you need me.
I'll see you tomorrow.
I totally missed that. Whose house was next to the synagogue?
Next door.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. And that's the new home base.
Man, I want to talk about Sosthenes too. Real quick, let's talk about Sosthenes. We got time?
Yeah. Sosthenes.
I'll turn off the outro.
I'm sorry. I
It was just a
found
little musical break.
you
Nice.
ended with that, and I absolutely.
Yeah,
it was
it's
refreshing, and it was. I mean, it was like, hear this guy. Go ahead. I want you to tell it because
Well,
I love it.
This poor guy, he's the newly appointed president of the synagogue because Crispus has converted. And there's definitely going to be a lot of eyes on him. There's a lot of controversy because the leader of the synagogue has converted to Christianity and left the faith of Judaism. And he's the new guy, and he absolutely would have been one leading the charge against Paul. That would have been his job. And it doesn't work out. Gallio just dismisses them, which you have to appreciate. Like, this isn't about our Roman law. You guys are dumb. Get out of here. This is your law. You're arguing about words and names.
Which is what Pontius Pilate should have done with Christ.
Yes, absolutely. And so just get out of here. I'm not going to worry about this. Well, some, whether it's Jews or Romans or both, are so upset about that. They beat him up. Right there in front of Gallio.
And there's really no clarification why. They
No,
just
they're
start.
just mad.
You suck.
Yeah.
Let's get him.
Yeah.
They were angry that they were losing leaders.
Yes. So there's certainly some anti-Semitism going on in the Roman Empire. They did not like the Jews. This is post Claudius kicking them out of Rome. So that's a big deal. So it could be all Romans. It could be the Jews who Sosthenes failed. He didn't get this done against Paul like we wanted to. So they beat him up, and that's one of the tools that the Lord uses to convert him away from the faith. So that not too long later, when Paul writes 1 Corinthians, he's like, "Hey, Sosthenes, our brother, he's with me," and he says hello.
He's all healed up.
I love that.
He's still got a limp.
Yeah, I love it that both synagogue leaders convert away into Christianity, and one of them is traveling with Paul now.
He had to run.
Oh yeah, I mean, the last time he was there, he got beat up.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Paul, when are you leaving? I'm gonna go.
I'm out.
This whole Jewish synagogue thing ain't working for me.
Not working.
Yeah. If I'm going to get flogged, I'll just get flogged with you.
I love.
I'm going next door.
Paul
This
showed
is
them.
what the Lord does.
Great stuff. Great stuff.
We're out of time.
We're out of time. You guys, thanks for joining us. That was a lot of fun. We'll see you next week.
Yep, sounds good.
Yep.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.